PM Modi in Canada. India's firm diplomacy pays off as Carney clears up Trudeau's mess. Nanny's Prime Minister Modi's arrival in Alberta. His first visit to Canada in nearly a decade coincided with the G7 summit held in the pristine setting of Kananaskis, nestled in the Canadian Rockies. While a rattled group of Khalistani protesters tried to make noise, they ultimately failed to overshadow the real story: a significant diplomatic shift between New Delhi and Ottawa. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney's warm reception of Modi was more than ceremonial. It was a signal that Canada is turning a page. Notably, Carney acknowledged transnational repression, a term often used in Canadian parlance around the Hardeep Singh Nijjar killing. But crucially, he also mentioned terrorism in the same breath, recognizing India's consistent concerns about Khalistani extremists operating out of Canada. While answering a question about the Nijjar case, Carney treaded cautiously, saying that a judicial process was underway and he needed to be careful of making further comments. This marks a dramatic shift from the Trudeau era, where extreme and theatrical rhetoric was deployed for narrow publicity and political gains. A major sign of progress was the agreement between the two leaders to designate new high commissioners with a view to returning to regular services to cities and businesses in both countries. This is a restoration of diplomatic ties that had been downgraded during Trudeau's spat with India, when embassies in Ottawa and New Delhi had slashed staff and escalated tit-for-tat measures. In fact, ahead of the meeting, the two countries made a pact on intelligence sharing on terrorism and crime, directly addressing India's concerns. Under this, the law enforcement agencies on both sides would cooperate with each other. For Canada, this can be sold as cooperation in the Nijjar case, but for India, this means cooperation on countless terror and crime cases involving Khalistanis and other criminals, not to mention a road to their extradition. This moment marks the success of Modi's steady, firm, and patient diplomacy. India has remained consistent in its stance on terrorism, extremism, and criminal syndicates, and never wavered even when faced with Trudeau's political theatrics and international mudslinging. Modi's maturity and firmness have paid off. He refused to dignify Trudeau's provocations, and instead let facts and India's red lines speak for themselves. Nanan Modi's last visit to Canada was in 2015, when Stephen Harper was Prime Minister. Harper had recognized the threat posed by Khalistani terrorism and chose to push trade and strategic cooperation with India. It was Harper's government that reversed Canada's position on India's nuclear program, clearing the way for Canadian uranium exports to India and doubling bilateral trade to $4 billion. But everything changed when Trudeau came to power. Under him, Canada slowly became a haven for Khalistani extremists. Cooperation with India on terrorism and crime diminished, and Trudeau openly pandered to the Khalistani lobby that propped up his minority government. The 2018 debacle, where Trudeau's India visit included a convicted Khalistani on his guest list, was just the beginning. Things nosedived further in 2023 when Trudeau accused India of involvement in Nijjar's death, an allegation that lacked evidence. Rather than responding to legitimate Indian demands for extradition of criminals and terrorists, Trudeau's government resorted to media theatrics, painting India as a perpetrator of foreign interference and transnational repression. The result was the worst deterioration in India-Canada relations in decades. But Trudeau's political gambit has ultimately collapsed. His handling of India-Canada ties, driven more by vanity than statecraft, unraveled under pressure. Facing mounting criticism from within his own party, Trudeau was eventually forced to step down as Liberal Party leader. This opened the door for Mark Carney, who took the reins and led the party to victory even as Canada came under intense pressure from a confrontational Trump administration. Now, Mark Carney is not a man of showmanship like Trudeau, but a seasoned economist who has formerly led the central banks of Canada and the United Kingdom. Carney brings a different tone to Ottawa's own of measured pragmatism. His campaign had already signaled a rethink on India. Upon taking office, he quickly set about recalibrating Ottawa's foreign policy. Carney extended the invitation to Modi for the G7 summit, recognizing India's growing global influence. While the invitation was unusually delayed, it was finally issued and accepted, likely the result of intense back-channel negotiations. The delay in Modi's G7 invitation raised eyebrows. For a moment, it appeared that Canada might break with 5 years of tradition by excluding India. But G7 partners are believed to have pressured Carney to ensure Modi's presence. Excluding India, an indispensable global actor in economic supply chains, the Indo-Pacific, and clean energy would have sent the wrong signal. India, too, leveraged its position. It made clear that an invitation without guarantees and security, on Khalistani threats, and on actionable diplomacy would not be accepted. Once those were secured, Modi's trip was confirmed. According to sources, India made its expectations clear: any outreach must come with meaningful action, not just optics. The outcome: a breakthrough agreement on intelligence sharing related to terrorism, crime, and extremist activity. This deal is perhaps the most substantial move yet, clearly reflecting Canada's acknowledgement of India's concerns. The Khalistani lobby is reeling. Their worst nightmare, a coordinated crackdown on their finances, networks, and protection, has begun to unfold. Carney, for his part, managed to walk a fine line, avoiding further escalation, managing media criticism, and showing the maturity that his predecessor lacked. In fact, Carney has been sending all the right signals and making all the right moves in his bid to normalize relations with India. First signs were when he stressed on economic ties with India even before his election. Then he began to clean house. He acted swiftly to distance his government from Khalistani sympathizers. Jagmeet Singh, the loudest voice of Khalistani politics in Canada, lost his seat. His party, the NDP, suffered a historic defeat, losing its official status. With this, the Khalistani lobby in Parliament lost critical leverage. Instead of dancing to the tunes of this lot, Carney's appointment of 4 Indian-origin ministers, none aligned with Khalistani politics. This was the second major signal. Anita Anand, who has never aligned with Khalistanis, was appointed as foreign minister. Maninder Sidhu, Ruby Sahota, and Randeep Sarai have also taken on strategic roles, and all represent a more moderate, cooperative tone with India. Meanwhile, just ahead of Modi's visit, Canada made headlines with its largest ever drug seizure: 479 kilograms of cocaine worth nearly $48 million. The operation uncovered ties between the arrested Indian-origin individuals and both Mexican cartels and US-based distributors. Investigators found that the drug money was being funneled into anti-India activities, including funding for Khalistani protests, referendums, and weapons procurement. Intelligence sources indicated ISI backing in this operation, with drugs trafficked to finance extremist groups in Canada. This bust not only vindicated India's repeated alarms but also pushed Canadian law enforcement to act decisively. Nanan Modi and Carney's handshake at Kananaskis was more than symbolic. It marked a potential turning point. Carney emphasized the importance of the India-Canada relationship not just in counter-terrorism but across the board: economic growth, energy transition, critical minerals, supply chains, and Indo-Pacific stability. There is massive untapped potential here. Current trade stands at just $8.6 billion, a fraction of what it could be. With Trump's tariffs on Canadian exports, and his casual calls for Canada's annexation, India presents a crucial opportunity for diversification. Canada's minor ALRIC economy complements India's manufacturing needs, particularly in rare earths, uranium, and clean energy inputs. In fact, with nuclear energy demand going up in India, a strategic uranium supply from Canada could make ties more resilient. There is also a rich people-to-people link: hundreds of thousands of Indian students and immigrants in Canada, most of whom reject Khalistani extremism and yearn for better bilateral relations. If all goes well, talks for a free trade agreement, which were cancelled amid Trudeau's diplomatic clash with India, can be revived to explore the trade potential of this relationship. India has just signed a massive trade deal with the UK, and Carney would be inclined to follow suit in due course. But challenges remain. Trudeau's legacy still casts a long shadow. Canadian intelligence agencies, such as CSIS, continue to group India alongside adversaries like China and Russia under the broad banner of foreign interference, a narrative that Khalistani groups are only too happy to exploit. Jagmeet Singh, though politically diminished, still claims Indian agents were spying on him, and sections of the media are eager to amplify such claims. For the reset to hold, Canada must deliver on its commitments, clamp down on extremists, walk back anti-India propaganda, and avoid pandering to fringe lobbies. For India, cautious optimism must remain the mantra. The trust deficit won't disappear overnight, but this time, there is a reason to believe India-Canada relations had hit rock bottom. India's stern, no-nonsense diplomacy has ensured that Canada woke up to its red lines. With patience and grace, Modi strategically left room for Carney to make amends, and the new Canadian leadership ultimately did so the first chance it got. Now, both sides are speaking a common language: security, mutual respect, and economic partnership. Swipe left for next video. The G7 summit in Canada may well be remembered not just for its multilateral agenda, but for marking the moment when two democracies, once adrift, found a reason to reconnect and reconcile. The Khalistani veto on India-Canada relations is dead. It only remains to be seen if Canada can live up to its promises. Latest blogs.